And now, we're going to switch from love letters to fervent debate. You have no idea what's coming because this segment will be very special, and I will ask you to be extremely committed, engaged, and supportive because it takes a lot of gut and courage to come out on this stage, and you see the sophisticated layout we have for this section. It takes a lot of courage for our debaters and speakers to come up here and defend only one side or the other, because as you have seen in the last couple of days, the topics we're discussing are huge. It's very hard to take only one stand and only one. So now I will invite on stage the moderator for this session. Max Strasser is the international editor for the New York Times, because the debate is based on an Oxford-style debate construction, but it is done in partnership with the New York Times. He is London-based. He's here with us today. Max and his 4 debaters. I would like to invite you now on stage. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I'm actually the international opinion editor for the New York Times, which is fitting because I think what we're doing here today is a lot like what the opinion pages at the New York Times and other newspapers do, which is looking at one of the big issues and looking at it from several sides and presenting several competing arguments, presented strongly, backed up by facts, and letting people make up their own minds. And that's exactly what this debate is for. And we're going to be talking about one of the big issues, something Clara was just mentioning actually, which is food, agriculture, and how it relates to the climate, how the climate relates to agriculture, and what the future of that is. And so the way this is going to work is we're going to have 2 sides. We've got a for side and an against side, and they're going to be debating a motion, which is this House believes that agribusiness is not doing enough to adapt its food production to a changing climate. So that's the topic that we're going to be discussing today. And we're going to hear first from one speaker for the topic, and then from one speaker against. And after that, we'll hear from another from each side. And then we're going to take a break. We're going to hear from a jury, a very esteemed jury, who's going to reflect a little bit about what we've heard so far. And then we're going to come back. We're going to hear, again, some closing arguments from each side for the motion that agribusiness is not doing enough to adapt its production to a changing climate, and against that motion. And then we're going to ask you, the audience, to vote and see how you've been persuaded by the lively debate that we've been having. So, is that clear? Great. I think it's going to be really friendly but fierce is what I'm hoping for. No pressure. Okay, so now that we know how it's going to work, I'm going to bring Rachel Kolbe to the stage for some introductory remarks reflecting on the topic. And Rachel is the Corporate Social Responsibility Director for the InVivo Group, and she is an expert on the topic, and she's going to have a lot to say.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, just to introduce the subject quickly, because I am CSR Director at InVivo, which is a French group of agricultural cooperatives. And so we really take to heart these issues. And I'm particularly proud to talk about it here with this backdrop of disrupting for peace, because we do know that indeed agriculture is a key cornerstone of peace and peaceful times. And what I wanted to point out before the debaters actually take the floor is that clearly humanity is most creative when we have the most horrific challenges before us. And when we came out of the Second World War and we had to feed the world, that's what everybody did. Everybody mobilized in order to find ways in order to produce massively to relieve the hunger and get people back to work as well, because agriculture is a big employer, in order to make amends with the context that people are in at the time. We know now that that also produced certain unintended consequences, and oftentimes when we consider global warming, most often people consider agriculture as one of the perpetrators who has brought along a lot of very negative repercussions. Global warming, though, what I'd like to point out is maybe this new critical problem that we can actually all muster our courage and channel our energies to resolve. And that's where I want to start thinking about agriculture positively. And agriculture, if it's done properly, it can really help relieve the needs in terms of healthy, quality foods. But it also can really be one of our major allies in terms of taking on climate change. Because when agriculture is done properly, there are ways of help regenerating the soils, which can help purify water, which can help sequester more carbon, which can also help regenerate biodiversity. Plus, it can also be, when it's done correctly, create even more biomass, and so it can actually be a substitute for some of our petrol-sourced solutions that we're all accustomed to, going toward more sustainable bioenergy, biochemicals, biomaterials, and all of that in a way that helps us, each of us in the different sectors, become more carbon neutral, but also creating more jobs, especially in rural environments, where we know geopolitically that that is also a new major issue in terms of security. What I'd like to point out, though, because maybe what I'm saying to you so far is rather obvious, is that there's still an economic equation that we haven't quite figured out. And one of the things that Big Ag has allowed is that it's a way for farmers to find a way to actually produce as much as there needs to be and be able to relieve the challenges in terms of nutrition. But when it comes down to actually transitioning to more virtuous practices, so to speak, that actually has a cost to it. And the cost, we're not always sure that the consumer can or will pay for it. We're not always sure that the procurement agencies in distribution or in the brands are prepared to pay for it either. And farmers, when they're going to look for new solutions, it's not always sure that some of the amazing technological progress that we see can actually fit into what they can pay for. And so what I just want to say for the debate is that we should be considering all of these issues with a triple performance, a triple capital performance, where it's not only the environment that counts, it's not only the technical performance that counts, it's also the social progress that that can enable. And that probably today, when we're looking at some of the new data, the big data and artificial intelligence, et cetera, that maybe that's what's going to allow the big to be bigger thanks to all of the small. Let me explain. You go into Africa, you have only smallholder farmers. With data, actually, you can mutualize the progress and the technology that is used from all of the different smallholders and actually scale up that way, even though their own specific work remains local. And that is probably one of the dynamics that needs to come into play. And just to finish, it's also what's going to be able to maybe trace what's being done, enable food security, enable access, and in that way then actually revive the way that human beings need to thrive in our current context and actually disrupt for peace.
Thanks so much, Rachel. That was, I think, gave us a lot to think about and sets a groundwork for the conversation going forward. Now we're going to hear from our first two debaters, speaking for the motion, which is, as it says above me, that agribusiness is not doing enough, is Julie Lerner. She's the CEO and founder of PanXchange, and she will be speaking for the motion. You ready? Ready to debate? All right.
Ready.
Go for it, Julie.
Oh, okay, I thought you were introducing both of us first. So, there are a lot of exciting inventions we could discuss here. Precision agriculture that increases yields with less water and energy, genetically modified seeds that are more climate resilient, and then there's mass food production alternatives like Beyond Meat that uses a pea protein isolate. It tastes like beef, but uses a lot less resources than traditional livestock. These inventions have the ability to address food security in light of climate change, but let's take a step back and look at this at a macro level. Because I believe that if we really want to move the needle on healthy food that's affordable, accessible, climate resilient, three things need to happen. First, invention needs patient capital. The VC model is ludicrous. When you hastily invest in 10 companies, Knowing statistically that 9 will fail and hoping for that one unicorn, that doesn't work. Investors, if you really want to be impactful, you need to take risks and be patient, because while the discovery of solutions might be overnight, deployment and adoption is evolutionary, not revolutionary. Second, supply chains are in desperate need of democratization via technology. We are decades behind financial markets. Supply chains, agricultural supply chains everywhere are opaque, fragmented, and inefficient. This may sound like a promotion for PanXchange, but it is an example of how tech empowers buyers and sellers by providing instant market access and price discovery. It democratizes supply chains, giving direct access to smaller players and eventually even smallholder farmers. And second, it can provide a resource in today's unstable world. Floods, droughts, crop disease, trade wars. When supply chains are disrupted, technology like this is growing increasingly important to get the surplus crop to the areas that need it most. And finally, government aid programs should focus on distribution and education of private enterprise technologies. They need to know their strengths. As an example, when I was launching our subsidiary in East Africa, there was a heavily funded UK and US aid organization that was competing with me to build an online exchange. These people were neither technologists nor commodity traders, but they did know the plight of the smallholder farmer. Aid funding would be far more effective if it focused on training and deployment of new invention in agriculture, because as I mentioned, the fix is evolutionary. And the solution needs to be based on economically viable and thus financially sustainable programs.
Thank you, Julie. That was a lot of bold prescriptions, so we appreciate that on the op-ed page and in the room, I'm sure. Now, disagreeing with the motion is going to be Ludovic Spiers. Ludovic Spiers, I apologize. He's the CEO of Agrial. He's a longtime agribusiness stalwart, as he described himself to me at lunch. And now he's going to be speaking. He'll be speaking in French, I should note. So if you are looking for simultaneous translation, it's a good time to put on your headsets. Great. And now we'll hear from you, Ludovic. Go ahead.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je vais donc répondre en partie à Julie sur certains points. Agrial, donc, nous sommes une coopérative, ce n'est pas un mouvement capitaliste, c'est une coopérative qui a ses vertus et qui permet de remonter les résultats aux coopérateurs, donc aux agriculteurs. Je voudrais juste revenir et faire un clin d'œil sur ce qui s'est passé hier, c'est-à-dire sur le 6 juin, juste après-guerre. On nous a demandé, aux agriculteurs de produire pour que nos pays soient autosuffisants. Il ne faut jamais l'oublier. Et donc, nous nous sommes mis au travail et nous avons réussi dans l'agrobusiness, à produire les volumes suffisants pour que nous ayons suffisamment de nourriture. Et donc, une première réussite, alors certes en utilisant des moyens très intensifs, en utilisant beaucoup de chimie, mais nous avons réussi. Certains voudraient que l'on fasse évoluer l'agriculture. Il faut la faire évoluer, et là-dessus, je pense que nous serons d'accord. Mais il ne faut jamais oublier qu'il y a 800 millions de personnes qui actuellement souffrent de la faim ou meurent de faim. Donc nous n'avons pas fini le job pour produire les volumes nécessaires sur Terre. Et arrive un nouveau problème, qui est le problème du climat. Donc nous avons un deuxième handicap dans la gestion de nos productions, qui est d'intégrer ces évolutions du climat, qui perturbent complètement l'écosystème dans lequel nous sommes. Parce qu'avant, les productions étaient agricoles, fixées dans un lieu donné, et les productions bougent. Prenez la production laitière, elle remonte partout en Europe. Bientôt, il n'y aura plus de lait en dessous de la Loire, en France, mais partout en Europe, ça remonte. Et donc, il va falloir que nos écosystèmes, qui étaient basés sur une production, la transformation et la commercialisation, évoluent. Et ça va nous amener à revoir complètement ce système. Donc, le volume, on risque de ne pas aller plus loin, parce qu'il va falloir faire évoluer l'agriculture avec cet handicap de l'évolution du climat. Un autre point très important à intégrer et qui montre que nous sommes proactifs, c'est que nous devons faire évoluer le stockage. Avant, nous avions un stockage qui était relativement restreint parce qu'on avait une sécurité alimentaire simplement de quelques semaines en fin d'année. Maintenant, il va falloir qu'on ait des stocks plus importants car quand nous aurons de mauvaises années comme cette année en céréales, il faudra bien avoir les stocks nécessaires pour faire la soudure avec les moins bonnes années. Donc un contexte complètement différent et nous sommes complètement proactifs pour aller vers un autre modèle qui fera que nous aurons demain une autre agriculture.
Thank you very much, Ludovic. That was also persuasive. So here we've got two persuasive sides, one rooted in sort of a lot of history and information about the background of the industry, another sort of looking much more to the future and sort of giving a more prescriptive take. And both I find very compelling and convincing. Let's keep going. Let's see if you're persuaded by our next set of speakers. Now speaking for the motion is going to be Frederic Pivetta. He's the managing partner of Dalberg Data Insights. He's coming to us from Brussels, I believe, and he will tell us why he agrees with the motion that agribusiness is not doing enough. Are you ready? All right, go.
Good afternoon. This is the production of the food industry, a box full of chocolate. Who wants the box of chocolate? Who likes it? Who wants it? Pierre-Emmanuel, you want the box? That's what remains of the box after you subtract the waste of the food industry. Because what you can see, you can have the chocolate afterwards, no worries. What you can see is that this is really the waste. 1/3 of the total food in the world is about waste, is going to go to trash. 75% of the calories produced by the industry are just wasted. It's too costly. For every dollar, for every euros that are spent on just producing that chocolate, 2.2 euros are going to be spent to repair for the environmental catastrophe that producing that chocolate box has generated. On average, the US has 60 years of soil left. 60 years. It's not a lot. It's more or less the equivalent of the UK that disappears every year. It's not effective neither. 50% of the population still doesn't have enough food in a way or another, while the other half of the population is obese. That's great, right? What an impact. But I know it's difficult. And frankly, Quentin, good luck. Because it's difficult, the value chain is very complex. It's not only very fragmented, it's very long. It's very long because it goes from the agriculture to the city. And the thing is that cities have been changing over time. And cities have been changing over time because you have a lot of people coming from the countryside who move to the city. It's really urbanization, what we call urbanization. And at the same time, you have an explosion of population in the world. So imagine, you have like, I think, 9 billion people that are foreseen for 2050, while you have like an increase, a massive increase in urbanization. There are solutions, for sure there are solutions, but what it means is that we need to go very fast. We need to go very fast because we are destroying soil, we are wasting energy, and still a lot of people in the world are still starving. Solutions could be indeed more data. Solutions could be indeed trying to link and to leverage the global trends that we see. That is really forward-looking, as Julie was talking about before. But what I wanted to point out here is that it's not only that the food industry is ineffective, it's costly, and there's a lot of waste.
All right. That was also persuasive and vividly illustrated. So we appreciate that. Now, For the final statement of the first round of the debate, we're going to hear from Quentin Sannié. He's the founder and president of Symbiotopy. He's Symbiotopy. Thank you, and I apologize. And he's going to be disagreeing with the motion that agribusiness is not doing enough. It does not look like he's got any chocolate, but I'm sure he has strong arguments nonetheless. Let's hear from you. Go.
I left last year. I left my company in tech to go to create a Symbiotopy, because I believe that the next frontier is our future. How are we able to build the future? And first of all, I'd have a good news about what we are talking about. Is 2 years ago, Bayer bought Monsanto for $65 billion. And today, the global value of Bayer plus Monsanto is less than 50 billion. So it's a good news because it's a way for the industry to reinvent the model. You say that the industry, the agro industry, is not doing what should be done to fix the problem. But what your industry is doing, what your industry is doing. So the problem is, what is the trigger to change the industry? I mean, during the 70 last years, the agro business bought a wonderful, efficient system to produce food, industrialize, distribute the food, and so on. So, and to be very efficient, to deliver very affordable product to everybody. And now we are living more than never before on the planet, more than 80 years in our countries. And it was 40 years, maybe 1 century or 1 century and a half ago. So, and the industry is delivering very safe product to the people. So what is the link between the industry, this industry, and the problem of the climate change? I mean, there is certainly a link, but you are not presenting a link. You are not presenting a solution. You are saying you are not doing, but who is doing? Nobody is doing. So my role, I believe that our role is to find the trigger where we can press, the trigger we can find to change the system together, and not only to say that, to shame the people and who are managing this kind of company. So I believe Ludovic, for example, and many people I know in this industry are committed to change it, are looking for a new model, are looking to improve the quality of their impact on the planet, on the climate, and everything. But please be more precise if you want to put the finger on us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin. That was impassioned. He asked some hard questions for all of us, all of our industries, including apparently the newspaper industry. So we'll all be thinking more about what we can be doing for climate change in addition to agribusiness. All right, so we've had a fierce, impassioned first round. I think it's time to catch our breath a little bit and bring the jury up to sort of recenter us, to give us a little bit more to think about. So now I'm going to invite Rachel Kolbe back to the stage, and along with her, Leah Dardry, who is a political strategist and a pastor, and Marlo Hood, who's an environmental correspondent for the AFP. And they're going to reflect on what we've heard so far on both sides of the debate. They're going to discuss the issues a little more, give us more to think about, and then we'll go back to the fight.
I have to confess I'm a little confused, having heard what I just heard, because I think in some ways, to my mind, having, from my perspective of someone reporting on climate change, both of you have skirted the issue in a way. Quentin and Ludovic have expressed an openness to doing things differently, but we have yet really to hear exactly what that might. No, but it's. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean, and to help sort of fill in one of the blanks here that you just mentioned in terms of what kind of impact are we talking about? There are a lot of studies now trying to measure what percentage of CO2 emissions come from the world food system and the agriculture system. And they vary between 1/4 and 1/3. So it's a major, major contributor if you take all the food system together. So, and it's also seen, I mean, we have a major meeting or report that will be delivered in August from the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, excuse me, on precisely this question, food systems, agriculture. And from what I can hear about the report, it will confirm those figures and indeed quite grim. But it's also low-hanging fruit. That's what, or there is low-hanging fruit there in terms of addressing climate change. So I'd like to hear more concrete, you're open to doing things differently, but how? And then also, I guess, a little uneasy when I hear the foresight of this argument kind of dumping on big ag. I think there is plenty to criticize there. The intensive agricultural system has gotten us clearly partly into the situation we're in. But we have to define what is within their power and purview to change. I mean, getting people to stop eating beef is not entirely on big agriculture. That's changing behavior. Governance and government has to have a role in that as well. So I'll just throw those elements out there for now, and we'll come back.
Bonjour. I'm probably the least qualified to have anything to say about this since I just learned how to recycle about a year ago. And I'm no longer guilty of putting my plastics in the trash. But I do know what it's like to live in a food desert where there isn't enough food, healthy food options, and where people eat processed food because that's all they have. And the processed food, the processing of that food, the things that they buy in shelf-stable packages, is in and of itself a precipitator of climate change. So my question, as I listen to the panels, both very educational, thank you. I didn't understand what the solution is. I don't think either side, I'd love to hear you talk more about what you propose to do to address the issue of climate change, particularly since so much of this has to do with the people. And so I want to broaden the conversation to talk about the people. How are you going to get the food to the people? Really, the production of agribusiness is to produce food for the people to consume. And how do you do that in a way that is sustainable and that allows people to have the options to ensure that they are living healthy lives? If you say that 1/3 of the food goes to trash, 50% of the population is starving, and the other 50% are obese. They're not obese because they are eating so much. It's because they are eating the wrong things, because the right things are not available to them, because business on both sides and government don't ensure that they have the options available to them in their communities in order to be consumers of proper goods that are sustainable, which then allows them to lead lives that are sustainable. They got a lot of other things to think about besides climate change. Most of them are trying to get the kids to school safely, or just trying to live a life with a wage that is livable. So whether they have beef or whatever that is, pea something, is not easy for them or even at the top of their list of things that are important. So it's our job as defenders of the climate to make it important to them by presenting it in a way that it becomes a priority for them. And that includes ensuring that the food that they eat that business is able to get it to them in a way that is consumable, that is healthy, and that will help them to live full and productive lives. And so I want you to talk about the people and what this has to do with the people.
So, hard to come as the third one to comment, because I agree that we want to know more in terms of exactly what the solutions are that you're proposing. And I want to talk about the farmers, and not just, which also for the people, but oftentimes the people are the farmers. And so what I retained was the final phrase of let's change the system together. Clearly, we're going to need to actually leverage all of the different types of solutions to be able to amount to anything big. And so I guess where I wanted to dig deeper above and beyond what actually the questions were already raised was, if there is progress, how can we democratize it so that actually there are more farmers who can use that progress to improve their ways of doing things? And if there is data, then how can we actually use that data to fluidify things so that we do have a more efficient system? Thank you.
Thank you to our jury, who I think gave us a lot to think about. And our panelists now, our debaters, will convene separately off stage for the next 4 or 5. Oh, they stay here. They're going to convene here. They're going to convene right in front of you and discuss their closing arguments. In the meantime, we're going to watch a short video, I believe, about the New York Times. So enjoy that. And we'll be back in a couple minutes for the closing arguments. So, you know, keep your minds open. Be ready to hear one last persuasive case. All right. Now, I hope our two sides agreeing and disagreeing with the motion have had time to coalesce their arguments, solve the world's problems, answer some of the questions that our jury asked, and prepare their final remarks. Who's going to be speaking for each side? We've got Frederic, and for your side, Ludovic. So first, we'll hear from Frederic agreeing with the motion that agribusiness is not doing enough to transform.
Yeah, my team wants to be constructive, so we're going to try to come up with solutions, and we had like 1 minute and 30 seconds to solve the entire food system problem, so she should be fine. There is a lack of data. I mean, this is something that you pointed out, Quentin, before, and I think this is really true. I mean, my company, we are running projects in all over the globe, and data is really the essence. And there are data, but the data are focusing mostly on the farmer side. And the food system is on the farmer side, but it's also on the consumer side, on the industrial side, on the cities. So what I see in the market is that we have a lot of data when it comes to yield, when it comes to soil data. For instance, we have been working with the Gates Foundation on mapping the entire Indian country of India.